If you have your Bibles, you can just go ahead and go on over to Genesis 37. That's where we'll start. When God plants a dream in your heart, your responsibility is to plant yourself in God. Do you hear what I'm saying? When God plants a dream in your heart, your responsibility is to plant yourself in God. In other words, we got to be obedient in every season, and obedience will carry us in the direction of the dream. I don't believe every dream comes from God, but I believe there are dreams that come from God. And when there's a dream from God, I want to run the race to accomplish the dream that He puts in my heart. Beginning in Genesis 37, we see the story of Joseph. Now, when I'm talking about Joseph, I'm not talking about the earthly father of Jesus. This is long before that. This is Joseph, the great-grandchild of Abraham. You had Abraham, you had Isaac, you had Jacob, and then you had Joseph. So that's where we're at. Joseph's story begins with a dream. He didn't decide what he dreamed. He fell asleep and had two dreams. Isn't that interesting? When we look at this story here in a minute, you're going to be like, why did he dream this, and why did he get such a hard time for what he dreamed? He didn't decide to dream this. God gave him this dream. It may have been inconvenient for him. You'll see that here in just a minute. It's going to be pretty inconvenient for Joseph to have this dream. But God put a dream in his heart. And I think that this far along in my Christianity that I know the difference between a God dream and a man dream. I think I know the difference. I think I know the difference in the way that it comes and the way that it presents itself in my life. And the things that make me keep rolling, there's something about a God dream that makes you get up every day and keep fighting for it. Dreams that I have about a zillion a night. I'll just be honest. I fight things in my sleep, and April has to wake me up, and I have all kind of crazy dreams about all kind of crazy things, and I realize they're not all from God. Thank goodness. So I understand a God dream when I see one. But Genesis 37, let's go there. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, and his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel, that's Jacob. He's also called Israel. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. If you want to make one of your children unpopular when you have a bunch of other ones, don't make an ornate robe for him. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. But Joseph had a dream. And when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said, listen to this dream that I had. We were building sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. And his brothers said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. Listen, I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. And we told his fathers as well as his brothers. His father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I, your brothers, actually come and bow down to the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. One thing I see about this right away is you got to be careful who you share your dream with. It can be the right dream. Joseph's dream is the right dream. But he's a little young, he's a little immature, and he shares it with his brothers, and they're like, we don't like this. When you think about the sun and the moon, that's his mother and father, and 11 stars, that's his 11 brothers are bowing down to him. That's where he gets that from. But you got to be careful. At this point, you got to think, how many people counted out Joseph's dream? His brothers are obviously jealous of him and ridiculed him for the dream, which I believe it was more ridiculing him because he believed or wondered just what this dream might be. And then his father rebuked him, asking, what is this dream that you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down before you? And it makes you wonder how many people thought Joseph would never be anything more than his brothers. You ever been underestimated before? You ever had somebody look at you and say, really, you're the one that's going to do that? And you felt like you were the one that God had called, or you felt like the one that your company had put in charge. And you ever been underestimated when somebody looked at you and they just kind of had that look like, yeah, really you? How many times was he underestimated? Now look what happens next. We're going to go a little bit further down this. His father sends him to check on his brothers who were grazing their flocks. And so Joseph obeys his father and he goes and searches for his brothers. This is verse 18. But they saw him in the distance, his brothers, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. I don't know if you have siblings, but I never wanted to kill my brother. I mean, I wanted to fight him or something, but I never wanted to kill him. This is a whole other level here. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dream. Now, they knew that he was highly favored by their father. They knew this was going to crush their father if they killed him. But they hated him so much on the inside that didn't matter. And that's what hate does, is it digs down roots and creates fruit that you just don't really desire, even though you think you do. And so it says, verse 21, when Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. And Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern, and the cistern was empty. There was no water in it. And they sat down to eat their meal, and they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites from Gilead. Now hold on. So they throw him into this cistern and they're eating. And the whole time that they're eating, I'm sure he's yelling out, trying to get out of this cistern. But how cold-hearted is it that you can sit there and eat lunch while your brother is yelling? And they wanted to kill him. But they looked up. In the mercy of God, a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. And his brothers agreed. So when the Midianites merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. So they took him to Egypt. He's captured by his brothers. It's an attack for his life because of their jealousy. They sought to kill him. Why? Because he had a dream and he was favored by his father. His brother Reuben sought to save his life, so he told them just to throw him in the cistern, thinking that he would come back and get him later. But then when they sat down to eat, they saw the caravan of the Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. And he's sold into slavery, and although uncomfortable, it prevents him from being killed. It's the grace of God. Because they could have killed him and left him there, but they sold him into slavery and he went into Egypt. And Joseph doesn't know that the dream that he's had before is beginning now with what seems like trouble. And you say, well, God's put something in my heart and then it got difficult. Yeah, it happens like that sometimes. Doesn't mean we're supposed to turn around and run. And so he gets sold into slavery. And look what happens next. So then he goes from where he is to Egypt now. And meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. So he's sold right away into Potiphar's house. And he's taken away from his homeland. And he's carried to Egypt. And he's sold again to be a servant in Potiphar's house. Has he done anything wrong at this point? He has not. You say, well, that's not fair. It may not have been. And all of this started with jealousy because he was favored by his father. And then his brothers were triggered by a pair of dreams that Joseph had. Now Joseph is far from home. His brothers have gone away. His father thinks he's dead. They've chosen to forget him. He is a servant in a foreign land. But even still, there's something that's different about Joseph than all of his brothers. Joseph is rooted in his relationship with God. How many of you are rooted this morning? Amen? You're rooted in your relationship with God. It doesn't matter to me what happens tomorrow. This time next week, I'm still going to be loving the Lord. Whether I'm here or I'm in eternity, I am still going to be loving the Lord. I told you last week I'm riding this thing out to the end. That's the plan. I'm thankful that I had another week where I can stand on this stage and say, I have lived for the Lord this week. Every day I've sought Him. I've looked for Him. I am rooted in Him. Joseph doesn't allow his circumstance to alter his relationship with God or change the view of God's position in his life. We cannot allow our circumstance to change who God is, because it does not change who God is. And you wouldn't want it to be honest. Many times the sad thing is when our situation is difficult because of the choices that we've made, and we want God to be like our genie in a lamp and save us from the consequences of our own action. How many times have you gotten yourself into trouble by the decisions you made? Even when we have been dealt a bad hand we don't deserve, we get mad at God and we allow our circumstances to lead us away from our dependency on God. But Joseph here, he's a servant in Potiphar's house now, and he chooses to serve with integrity because who he is not defined by the circumstances in his life. That's what you tell about the character of man, is when circumstances heat up, that person is rooted, that person is grounded, that person knows who they are in the Lord. And the circumstance may get bad, sickness may come, but they don't look at God and say, well, I'm just done with you, God. I'm done. Joseph doesn't do that. He goes from the favor of his father to the cistern, to being sold into slavery, to being a servant in somebody else's house. He's done nothing wrong. He's 17 years old. I would think about myself at 17 years old. If I'm put in that situation, do I have that kind of integrity at the time to rise to the occasion? Joseph did. But yet, he is not changed by what happens to him. And he's not changed by what others do. He could have been lazy in Potiphar's house. Hey, I shouldn't have been a servant here. I'll just be lazy, I'll just try to get by. I'll do enough to get by. He could have stolen from Potiphar when no one was looking. I'm sure Potiphar had a lot of expensive things around. And Joseph could have took a few things and nobody would have ever know, because nobody's seeing those secret things. But he doesn't do that. Now flip over to Genesis 39. Joseph is just playing the hand that he's dealt. So Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. But the Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. And when his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. And Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. This shows us something about how God works. When we're faithful in small things, he makes us the master over many things. And even though Joseph is unjustly the servant in his master's house, God has put him in great favor with his master. Why? Because he serves with integrity. Why don't you go to your job in the morning and serve the position you're in with integrity and seek to advance it to the best of your ability and see what God might do? You might be surprised at how it goes in a few months. You might be surprised at how things look for you. So from time to time, he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned. And the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. Maybe your company gets blessed because of you. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care with Joseph in charge. He did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now I love this part. Now Joseph was well built and handsome. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph. She's a good one. Said, come to bed with me. But he refused. He said, with me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he's entrusted to my care. No one is greater in the house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against who? Potiphar? No. How could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? That's talking about somebody who has all of their priorities in the right place. He's not going to do it to Potiphar, but he's not going to do it to Potiphar, not because who Potiphar is. He's not going to do it to Potiphar because who God is in his life. Why? Because it gets back to, he is rooted in what he believes. He is rooted in who he believes. And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. And let me just tell you, if he is one of the masters of Pharaoh's guards, he probably has a beautiful wife, and you're looking at a 17-year-old kid. It's a tough situation. It's a tough situation. I mean, what is there to lose for Joseph at this point? What is there? He has nothing. He has nothing. He's been taken away from his family. His father thinks he's dead. All these things have happened to him. He has nothing. He could just go in and do whatever. No, he has a relationship with God that says, don't do that. Don't cross that line. He is doing everything right to the point that they put him in charge of everything in Potiphar's house. Things are looking up. And then Potiphar's wife, who, like I said, whom I assume is very beautiful, is literally begging this man to come to bed with her. And he refuses and says, my master's not withheld anything from me except you, because you're his wife. And then how could I do such a sinful thing and a wicked thing as sin against God? This refusal, I believe it enrages Potiphar's wife. And I think the reason that it enrages her so much is she's not used to being told no. And so one day she calls Joseph. She says, come in here, come to bed with me. She throws herself at him sexually. She grabs him by the cloak. And then he does what all of us should do with sin. He flees. It didn't say that he stayed around and fight and said, no, don't touch me, no. He took off running to the point where when he left, she had his coat and his cloak in her hand, and she's standing there, and I don't know if he's completely naked or almost naked, but he's getting out of Dodge. He says, I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to get caught up in this. And so many people want to get to sin and they want to put their toes in it and they want to experience it a little bit when they need to be running in the opposite direction. So she grabs hold of his cloak and he left. And when she realizes she has his cloak, she then falsely accused him of sexual assault because he repeatedly turned her down. And he's thrown into prison by Potiphar. Now, isn't it interesting? There's no trial here. He's just thrown into prison. Why? Because he is a foreigner servant and he does not matter. So he's thrown into prison. He's in prison for some time and he's forgotten about. Now, what did I say? He's done nothing wrong. So he gets thrown in the cistern. He gets sold into slavery. He gets sold into Potiphar's house. Now he's thrown into prison. And he could have said, God, why me? Why am I the one I've done everything right. He could have fussed. He could have complained. He could have talked about how bad it was. He could have thought, oh, God, you don't ever see me. You don't know me. I thought you were doing so good for me. But as soon as things started going good for me, then I'm thrown in prison now and I've not done anything wrong. God, what am I doing that you're picking on me? But he didn't do that. He just serves in his season. Thrown into prison. And after some time, the king's cupbearer and baker are thrown into prison. One night, they both have dreams. And they're trying to figure out what they mean. And while Joseph is in prison, I can't give you all of this scripture this morning because there is literally chapters after chapters. I think I preached this like 5 weeks one time. But while he's in prison, he excels in prison so much that they put him in charge there. Because the cream always rises to the top. And they basically, just like Potiphar's house, there's nothing that he wasn't in charge of other than being able to get out of the prison. He is in charge of everything there. And so the king throws his cupbearer and his baker into the prison. And while they're there, they have a dream the same night. And each one of them are trying to figure out what it means. And then Joseph says, I can tell you what they mean. And he actually tells the baker, judging from the dream that he has, he says, hey, you're going to go out and you're going to get executed. And he says, and the cupbearer, he said, judging by your dream, what you dream. And you can go back in there and look at that. It's around Genesis 39, Genesis 40. He says, judging by your dream, you're going to get reinstated back to your position. He said, but when you go back, he said, remember me. Remember that I've been put in here unjustly and that I've been wrongly accused. Just remember me. Remember me to Pharaoh when you were out from here. And they do not remember him, though. And he continues in the dungeon for 2 more years. Now, let me break this timeline down for you so far so that you understand. And it reminds me of David a little bit because when David fights Goliath, he's probably around 16 or 17. And he's like 30 before he comes into power in the kingdom. So there's like some time there. There's like 13 years. It's the same way for David. But it's the same way for Joseph. Scripture says that Joseph is 17 when his brothers sold him to the Ishmaelites. By the time he's released from prison and appointed as head over Egypt, which we'll talk about in a minute, Joseph is 30 years of age. Therefore, 13 years passed from the time Joseph is sold by his brothers to the time that he left the prison. So some of that time he was in Potiphar's house, we know, and he was in service to him. But at some point, Potiphar threw him into prison. So 13 years passed by for Joseph. 13 years of his life taken from him because one night he had a dream, and that dream triggered the jealousy of his brothers even further. 13 years, guys. 13 years seems like a long time ago. I've been here 3 years before that. That's 13 years. That seems like a long time ago. And you know what? I'm saying God was working in the dream when Joseph didn't know it. Remember, Joseph had these dreams that appeared to be his brothers and his families bowing down to him. Now go with me to Genesis 41. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream that he was standing by the Nile when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. And after them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came out of the Nile and stood beside those on the riverbank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. And then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. And after them 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. In the morning his mind was troubled, so he sent for all his magicians and wise men of Egypt. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but no one could interpret them for him. And then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, today I'm reminded of my shortcomings. And he tells him, he says, I'm reminded of my shortcomings today. He says, I remember when I was in prison. I remember when I was there. There was a man there. He was a Hebrew man. He said he was unjustly put there. And I had a dream one night, me and the baker, and he told me exactly what they mean. And that man can interpret the dream for you. And Pharaoh has a dream that he can't find an interpretation for. And the Lord allows the cupbearer to remember Joseph. He tells them there's the man that was there. He tells them how he interpreted his dream. And Joseph is brought from the prison to the palace. Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dream. And he tells him of a severe famine to come. He says, listen, there's fixing to be 7 good years. It's going to be really good. But there's going to be 7 more years that follow those 7 good years. And in those 7 bad years, it's going to be so bad, you're going to forget the good years. That's how bad it's about to be. He says, during those 7 years, we need to take and we need to store up all that we can so that we have plenty during the 7 bad. And Pharaoh is sitting there and he's trying to capture all of this in his mind that about what's going to happen to him. And he says, look here. He says, there has to be somebody to manage all this. And judging by the wisdom that you have, Joseph, you're that man. So it says the plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his people. So Pharaoh asked him, can we find anyone like this man? One in whom the Spirit is the Spirit of God? The Spirit of God that's been resting on him for 13 years. The Spirit of God that's been preparing him for 13 years. The Spirit of God that was in the cistern. The Spirit of God that was on the trail to Egypt. The Spirit of God that was with him when he was sold into slavery. The Spirit of God that was with him when he was in Potiphar's house. The Spirit of God that was with him when he led the prison. Can we find anyone like this man? One in whom the Spirit of God is. And then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one more discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. In other words, you are about to be the most powerful man on earth. Pharaoh is looking for someone to be in charge, so it makes sense to be Joseph as his highest command in Egypt. And the world was looking to Egypt at the time. So like I said, essentially it's the most powerful man in the world. And we're seeing the dream of a 17-year-old boy come to life. Dreams don't always happen overnight. 13 years have passed. And it's interesting because that morning he woke up in prison and that night he laid down in a palace. When God said it's time to reveal what all of this means, when God said it's time to fulfill what I gave you a dream about when you were 17 because you've been obedient, you've walked out this thing through slavery, you've walked out this thing through imprisonment. When he said all of a sudden now you were in prison, but now you're in a palace. Joseph had a dream, but all that had to occur didn't happen overnight. And let's be honest, it all happened because Joseph delighted in the Lord and he obeyed him through slavery in prison. And he sought God's plan and not his own parade. I think that's hard for some people. You want the accolades of everybody else. You want the praise of everybody else. But if Joseph would have been seeking to be king of Egypt, he would have never had access. If he didn't have a path to rule, he didn't have a path to rule in Egypt when everything was going good for Egypt. Like when everything was going good, there was no reason for Egypt to look for a Hebrew boy to be the king. And it didn't make sense for a 17-year-old to lead Egypt. But God developed a man in the process of pain. And we say, we don't want the pain. But see, God is developing our person in the process of pain. It's not that he's causing pain, but he's using pain to build us. That's why sandpaper rubs off the rub edges. It's not a painless process. There's pain in it, but it has a purpose. See, they would have never put a Hebrew boy in charge. The dream didn't make sense when he was 17 and first had the dream. But Joseph sought the Lord, and so he went wherever the Lord was taking him. He was obedient in all circumstances. And I would ask you, are you seeking the Lord in your life, and are you obedient in all circumstances? Because it doesn't look like this. I'll walk 2 steps this way for you, Lord. Oh, I need to go back over here and do this. I'll walk 3 steps for you now, Lord, and then I'll go back over here and I'll do this. No, it looks like I'm steadily following this path out. I'm going to be faithful to what you say, God. Even though I don't understand what today holds, I'm going to keep walking and I'm going to keep trusting, because even though I can't see it, I believe in the dream. I believe that it's going to come to pass because I believe it's your dream and your purpose. Joseph didn't know what the end of the dream looked like. Joseph didn't set out and say, oh, I want to be king of Egypt one day, Lord. So will you please make that happen? He didn't say that. God just said, here is a dream, Joseph, and in that dream, these sheaves are bowing down to you and yours is rising up. And Joseph said, I believe in you, God. I'm just going to keep trusting you. I'm going to keep following you. And even when it didn't look like it, he was just following. And one day he got up that morning in the prison, and then that night he laid down in the palace. And I will tell you this, there will be a day when the things that God has put in your heart will come to pass if you will obediently follow him. You can't get caught complaining about the position of today, because when we follow the Lord, we'll go to the places he wants us to go. Joseph was traveling in the direction of the palace even when it seemed like he had just been sold into slavery by his brothers. Have you thought about that? When they put him in slavery, he was going toward Egypt. He was moving toward the dream when he was really in the process of slavery. Everybody would have said, no, you're a slave heading into Egypt to be a servant to a master there. But what God knew was, no, I'm carrying a Hebrew into the middle of Egypt who is going to be the king. And it felt like it was betrayal by his family that are supposed to love you and fight for you. But they were jealous of Joseph, but God was actually using it for his glory. And Joseph had moments when he believed he was forgotten, but he was never forgotten because he was chosen. But prison doesn't feel like favor. And slavery doesn't feel like set apart. And that's why you can't go by what you feel. You have to go by what you know. And what do I know? What this word tells me. And I'm just going to keep leaning on it, because it keeps carrying me to all the right places to do all the right things. And you know what? As I walk it out and as I follow it and as I read it, he reveals things to me. And then I end up where I didn't think I would end up, to go to places I didn't think I would go, to do things I didn't think I would do. I'm not forgotten. I'm chosen. Joseph's falsely accused. Only he knew the truth, that he didn't do what Potiphar's wife said he had done. You know, only he knew. I say only he knew. He knew, the Lord knew, and Potiphar's wife knew. You ever thought about that? He's falsely accused. But think about Potiphar's wife after this. We don't hear anything about her after Joseph comes out of prison. I don't know where she was. Someone who once Joseph had to serve. Think about all the things he probably had to do for that household. Cooking, cleaning, all the different things he had to do for her, dodging her advances. She's making it difficult on him. Someone who had caused Joseph to spend years in prison because of her lie. I'm sure in the back of his mind, man, he probably wanted to be like, man, I could just punch her in the head every day he got up in that prison. I mean, I'd be frustrated with her. But after the prison, you know what? Her story didn't matter. She's not even mentioned. She's a character in the chaos, but she's absent from the success story. And there will be people in our lives who will momentarily cause issues, but in the end, they will be absent. Amen to that. Everybody that causes you difficulty is not here to stay. Some will go. I've had some characters in chaos in my life. I've had some people who for some season were a thorn in my flesh. But even though I'd done nothing wrong, but praise the Lord that His plan persists, His path is still certain, and those people came to pass not to stay. And Potiphar's wife, all we know about her is in the beginning, but she ain't in the end. Joseph leads the world through 7 good years. During that time, Joseph puts the skills required to use. He learned when he was running Potiphar's house. When he puts the skills he acquired while he was managing the prison, because when he was there, he does so well that they put him in charge of the prison. And while he's in Potiphar's house, they put him in charge of Potiphar's house. But those skills that he learned allowed him to be a great king in Egypt. And the difficult circumstances he faced was forming him to be the man he was by the time he was 30 and brought to the forefront of Egypt. And during the first 7 years, they stored up so much grain that the people from all over traveled to get grain from Egypt. And eventually, what happens is Jacob, Joseph's father, sends his sons to get grain from Egypt. And Joseph is in charge. His brothers assume that he's dead by now, I'm sure. Or at least he's gone so far they wouldn't ever see him again. And they have to come and they request grain. And they haven't seen him for 13 years and they don't recognize him. But he recognizes them. And what do they have to do? They have to bow before him. He toys with them a while. Eventually he brings them into Egypt and he takes care of them and he brings his father to Egypt. And the whole story is revealed to Jacob, his father. And now his whole family has to bow to him, and just like he had dreamed in the beginning. And at one point, Joseph's brothers believe that he's now going to get revenge because Jacob dies. And he says this to him. Joseph said to him, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph told his brothers what they meant to harm him, God meant for good. In Potiphar's house, in the prison, and in the field, God had a plan. And what a way to look at a situation and find forgiveness when you've been mistreated. Joseph, just like Jesus, he didn't give them what he deserved. He gave them grace and treated them good because God was in the details from the beginning. I know this, when things are going south, when friends are hard to find, when hope seems lost, can you trust the Lord is working it out? In the morning, it'll be Monday morning, in just a few hours. You'll be going to that job you either love or you hate. You'll be going to see those people that you like seeing, and there'll be a few of those people that you don't like seeing. And you'll be asking God, why do I have to keep coming here? But why don't you ask God, why do I have to keep coming here? Maybe He has a reason for you to be in the position that you're in, a purpose for that position. Because in tough times, the weak collapse and run away, but the strong throw their shoulders back and march one step at a time. I believe I've been underestimated many times. But it was never God who underestimated me. God's always known what I was capable of because He created it inside of me. And you're capable of so much. You just have to quit listening to the opinions of others and listen to the voice of God. Well, how can I do that, Pastor? Well, number one, you got to completely follow Him. You got to start reading His Word, and then you'll get to know His voice. Joseph didn't know the path to the palace was through the prison. He didn't know the palace was the destination for his life. You see that Joseph didn't know he was going to the palace. He was simply following the leader. And when you follow the leader, you go wherever they go and you end up wherever they're going. You don't have to know the destination before you take a step forward. You don't have to know where the future before you start. You just need to know who it is that's in charge of the future. Following the leader is the simplest game. If we were following the leader, I said, Dustin, come here, you're the leader. You go wherever you want to go. And I said, I'm just going to follow Dustin. He walked me all the way back to his house. I don't have to know how to get to his house from here. If he said, hey, I'm going to show you my in-laws' house. Okay. And I just follow. I'm going to end up at his in-laws' house. I don't know where they live. That's what it is. If we follow God, if we get up and we say, Lord, today I'm completely committed to you. I want to go where you go. He might just be whispering my name in rooms that I'm not in. That was happening to Joseph. He wasn't in the room. And then all of a sudden the cupbearer says, hey, there was a guy. His name was Joseph. He's in the prison. You can go down there and find him. And he's got the answer what you need. There might be somebody today that's saying, Matt, the pastor of Cornerstone, he has what you need. Just contact him. We're going to show you. We're going to give you what you need. You know, they need something over there. We're sending it already. And I don't even know that it's coming, but God's already preparing it. You don't have to know the destination before you take a step forward. If Jesus is Lord of your life, if you set out with purpose to be obedient, even when it doesn't make sense, God will make his dream your dream. Joseph didn't birth what he dreamed. God birthed what Joseph dreamed. And it's difficult to trust what you cannot see. So Joseph, you just had to trust the Lord. 10 years or more in prison for something you did not do, it has to be quite difficult. But Joseph just kept serving obediently. Why? Because he said, I'm going to ride this thing out to the end. He didn't know it meant the palace. He just knew the person. He's just blindly trusting the Lord. And his name is being spoken in rooms that he never entered. God has a way of doing that. Why are we worried that he doesn't see us when he's actually putting our name in other people's mouths that we never know about? When we're obedient to his plan, it'll come to pass. You know, when babies are conceived, there's a gestational period. It's the time when babies grow in the womb. If that baby comes before its due date, it's premature, meaning that it hasn't fully matured yet. If it's born too prematurely, it dies. Cannot sustain life outside of the womb. A dream that comes prematurely may not have the ability to exist at the present time, and forcing that dream to live before it's ready will result in the dream dying. As much as Joseph didn't want to be in the situations he was in, there was an appointed time that he would come to power, and everything wasn't ready, and he wasn't prepared for the placement until he turned 30. At 17, the dream was there, but it was 30 before it came to pass. Don't quit dreaming. Keep trusting the Lord. If we seek God's plan for our life and obediently follow him, why would we ever doubt that it will come to pass? In the days of slavery, we have to keep our eyes on the Lord. In the days of the prison, you have to remember the light when it's no longer coming through the windows because the windows are gone. When it feels like nothing's happening, when it feels like the movement is stopped, remember the elevators seem motionless, but the entire time they're actually taking you to a higher elevation. You get inside of an elevator, it doesn't feel like necessarily that you're moving up and down. You're just riding in a room. You don't know what's going on. And then all of a sudden it's carried you to a place that you could not get before. See, God is the creator of dreams. And when it's God's dream, it's God's timing. But it's destined to come to pass when we're obedient to his plan. And through Joseph, what happens is all of Israel is saved because he was in Egypt and brought his family. God's people was preserved through the famine. That's why hundreds of years later, after Joseph is forgotten, Egypt is enslaved. Egypt enslaves the Israelites. And Moses is there to lead them out. But they're in Egypt because Joseph brought them there and preserved them during a time of famine. And they had been preserved in Egypt and cared for until the appointed time for God to lead them back out as their own people again. And it all started with a dream. God has a dream about your life. I remember a guy one time, a really talented friend of mine, and he had a lot of goals and dreams. We had just finished high school, And I remember being at a camp with him, and I remember this guy looking at him, and he said, man, he said, you know what you dream about your life? He said, imagine what God is daydreaming about your life. But it involves you going all in when the situations around you seem uncertain. Because this is what I know. He's not uncertain. His plan will come to pass. And the great thing about it, when it's His plan and you're obedient to Him, is you'll feel like it's your plan. And He will make His desires your desires. And that will be the only place that you'll find fulfillment. And that's the place that I'm aiming for. Do I know what the future looks like? I don't have a clue. But I know what I'm going to do today. And I'm going to obediently follow Him. Worship team, would you come? It's the journey to a dream. We don't know where the end is before it begins, but we know that if God is in it, there is an end and there is something coming. Let's stand together this morning. Have you given your whole life and heart to Jesus? That's first and foremost the most important thing. And if you haven't, you need to do that. But the second thing is, are you in the middle of the process right now? And are you discouraged? I would tell you to level up now. What I mean by that is go all in for the Lord. Do things that you didn't do yesterday. Make sure that you're being completely obedient. Make sure that you're following the Lord. Make sure that your heart is in the right place. Go before Him and say, Lord, I am going to go all in. I'm going to trust You and I'm going to believe. And even if it takes years, Lord, I'm just going to love You. I'm going to seek You. And I'm just going to ride out and see where it goes. I will do everything that You tell me to do, Lord. Maybe that's the place you need to get to this morning, where you say, I'm not going to live discouraged, God. I'm going to live for You. And really believing in your heart, when you live for Him, it'll take care of everything else. Because that's what I believe. I believe if I'm looking for fulfillment, it's found in Him. And whatever I'm doing, if I go from pastor to parking lot attendant, I'm going to be happy in that. As they worship this morning, let's open the altars this morning. You have an opportunity to lay your life out before the Lord and say, it's all yours, God. It's all yours.